This happened to me a couple of months ago. I don't really like talking about it, but here goes. It was a Friday night, right? And I had to go to Walmart to pick up some groceries. It was late, like around 11 p.m., and the store was almost empty. You know how it gets kind of eerie when there are fewer people around, right? Anyway, I was pushing my cart down one of the aisles when I noticed this guy. He was just standing there, staring at me. I thought maybe I was imagining things, so I kind of shook it off and kept shopping. But every aisle I went to, he was there, just watching. It was like he was following me, but he never said anything, just stared. I tried to lose him by taking random turns and, going to different sections of the store, but he kept showing up. I thought, okay, maybe I should just leave. Forget the groceries. A few days later, I started noticing strange things around my house. Footprints in the mud outside my window, doors that I was sure I had locked left ajar, and even things inside my house seemed out of place. I thought maybe it was my imagination. One night I was lying in bed, trying to get some sleep. I heard a faint noise, like scratching. At first I thought it was just a tree branch against the window, but the sound grew louder. It was coming from the living room, and I grabbed a baseball bat I kept under my bed. I crept down the hallway. When I reached the living room, the noise stopped. I flicked on the light, but everything looked normal. Then I saw it. On the coffee table, there was a small piece of paper. I picked it up and read it, my heart nearly stopping. It said, "You can't hide from me." I called the police, but by the time they arrived, there was no sign of anyone. They took my statement and said they'd patrol the area more frequently, but there wasn't much else they could do. I felt trapped in my own home. A week later, I decided to install security cameras around my house. I hoped it would give me some peace of mind. The first night with the cameras, I barely slept, too anxious to see if they would catch anything. In the morning, I checked the footage. Most of it was just empty night, but around 3 a.m., I saw him. The same guy from Walmart, standing in my backyard, staring directly into one of the cameras. He stayed there for a few minutes before walking away. I showed the footage to the police, and they took it seriously this time. They promised to increase patrols and told me to be cautious. But even with their assurances, I started to wonder if I'd ever feel safe again. One night, I decided to stay at a friend's house, hoping to get away from the fear that had taken over my life. As I was packing a bag, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. It read, "You can run, but you can't hide." I showed my friend the message, and we decided to go to the police again. This time, they traced the number and found out it belonged to a burner phone, making it nearly impossible to track. I felt helpless, like this nightmare would never end. I stayed with my friend for a few days, but eventually I had to go back home. I couldn't avoid my life forever. When I returned, I found another note on my door. It simply said, "See you soon." I was terrified, but I couldn't live in fear any longer. I decided to confront him if he ever showed up again. I stayed up every night, waiting for him, but he never came. Weeks passed, and the sightings stopped. The texts stopped. It was like he vanished into thin air. I started to relax, but I knew I'd never truly feel safe again.
Okay, so this happened last summer. My sister and I decided to do some late night shopping at Walmart because we needed stuff for a road trip the next day. We had my nephew Tommy with us. He's only 5, and, kids get bored easily. We were in the toy section, letting Tommy pick out a toy to keep him occupied during the trip. I remember. I was looking at some board games when my sister said she needed to grab something from the next aisle. She asked me to keep an eye on Tommy. I turned around and he was gone. Just like that. I called out his name, thinking he might be hiding or playing a prank, but nothing. I ran down the aisles, calling his name louder, but there was no sign of him. My sister came back, and I told her Tommy was missing. We both started searching frantically, asking employees if they'd seen a little boy in a red shirt. The store made an announcement over the intercom, but no one had seen him. We were on the verge of hysteria when an employee suggested we check the security footage. They took us to this small room with a bunch of screens. The footage showed Tommy in the toy aisle, and then he just walked off the screen. There was no one else around him. It was so weird. We kept watching, and then we saw it. A man, dressed in a Walmart uniform, holding Tommy's hand, leading him towards the back of the store. We raced to the back, where the employee lockers and break rooms were. When we got there, the door was locked. We banged on it, screaming for Tommy. Finally, a manager came with a key. We burst in, and there he was, sitting on a chair, looking scared and confused. The man in the uniform, nowhere to be seen. The manager said no one fitting that description worked there. They checked every exit, but there was no trace of him. We grabbed Tommy and got the hell out of there. I still don't know what happened or who that man was, but I can't shake the feeling that if we hadn't found Tommy in time, something terrible would have happened. The next few days were a blur. We reported the incident to the police, but they couldn't find any leads. Tommy was too young to really explain what had happened. He just kept saying, "The man told me to come with him." We stayed away from Walmart for a while, but eventually we had to go back. Life goes on, but every time we went, we kept a tight grip on Tommy, never letting him out of our sight. One day, a few months later, I was shopping alone when I saw someone who looked like the man from the footage. He was at the end of an aisle, just standing there, watching me. My heart started racing. I tried to get a closer look, but when I turned the corner, he was gone. I reported it to the store manager, but they couldn't find anyone matching that description. One night, I was putting Tommy to bed when he looked at me with those big, innocent eyes and said, "The man was in my room last night. I felt a chill run down my spine." I checked every corner of the house, but found nothing. We changed all the locks and installed a security system, but I still couldn't sleep at night. The weeks turned into months, and the fear slowly faded, but it never really went away. I kept expecting to see that man around every corner, waiting to take Tommy again. Even now, whenever I hear about a missing child, my heart stops. I think about how close we came to losing Tommy and how lucky we were to get him back.
All right, so this is kind of weird and hard to explain, but here goes. I used to work the night shift at Walmart, stocking shelves and stuff. It was a pretty boring job, but it paid the bills, One night, I was in the electronics section, putting out new stock. The store was quiet, almost too quiet. Suddenly, I heard this weird noise. It was like whispering. I thought maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me, so I ignored it. But then it got louder. It sounded like it was coming from the back room where we kept the overstock. I decided to check it out, thinking maybe a radio had been left on or something. As I walked into the back room, the whispering stopped. Dead silence. I shrugged it off and went back to work. But the whispering started again. This time it was closer, like right behind me. I spun around, but there was no one there, and I was starting to freak out. I decided to call my coworker, Mike, who was working in the garden section. I told him about the noises, and he laughed, saying I was probably just hearing things. But he agreed to come over and check it out with me. We walked through the store, and as we got closer to the electronics section, the whispering started again. Mike heard it too, and his face went pale. We both followed the sound, which led us to the toy aisle. There, we saw a row of dolls on the shelf. Their eyes seemed to follow us as we moved. The whispering was louder now, almost like chanting. Mike grabbed one of the dolls and turned it over, looking for some kind of speaker or battery pack, but there was nothing. Suddenly, all the dolls on the shelf fell over at the same time. We jumped back, scared out of our minds. Mike dropped the doll, and we ran out of the aisle. We tried to tell our manager, but he just laughed and said it was probably a prank or some electrical malfunction. We finished our shift. The whispering, the dolls, it all felt too real to be a prank. That night, I had trouble sleeping. I kept hearing those whispers in my head. I decided to set up my phone to record audio while I slept, just to see if I could catch anything. The next morning, I played back the recording and there it was, the whispering, clear as day. I showed the recording to Mike, and he looked freaked out. We decided to investigate further. The next night, we brought a digital recorder to work and hid it in the toy aisle. We continued our shift, and when it was over, we retrieved the recorder and played it back. The whispering was there again. But this time, we heard something else. Footsteps. They were faint, but unmistakable. We decided to check the security footage from the toy aisle. We watched for hours, and then we saw it. A shadowy figure, moving between the shelves. It was barely visible, but it was there. We reported it to the manager, but he dismissed it as a trick of the light. Mike and I knew better. We couldn't keep working there without knowing what was going on. We decided to stay overnight in the store, hiding in the back room until everyone else left. Around 2 a.m., the store was completely silent. We heard the whispering again, and this time we followed it. The sound led us to the toy aisle, where the dolls were lined up, staring at us. The air felt thick. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and we saw it. A figure, standing at the end of the aisle. It was tall, with dark, hollow eyes. It didn't move, just stared at us. We were frozen in place, too scared to run. Then, the figure started to move towards us, and the whispering grew louder. We snapped out of our trance and bolted out of the aisle. We didn't stop running until we were outside the store. We called the police, but by the time they arrived, the figure was gone, and the store was silent. We quit our jobs the next day. We couldn't go back, not after what we saw. I still don't know what it was or why it was there, but I know I'll never forget those eyes. Mike and I don't talk about it much. It's like, if we don't acknowledge it, maybe it won't come back. But every now and then, I'll hear a faint whisper, and my heart will race. I don't think I'll ever be able to walk into a Walmart again without feeling that fear.